Annyeonghaseyo and greetings, ninth graders. It's good to be with you again, even though that this communication is only going in one way. It's good to know that I'm with ninth graders again. I get a lot of positive energy from this class. I really enjoy this class. Hopefully you're all doing well during our extended coronavirus break. As for me, you can see that the hair's getting long and this corona beard is out of control. I started growing this thing basically because I'm too busy at home chasing after kids to shave. But I was thinking that the more time I give this beard, the better it's going to look. But actually, I was telling the eighth graders, I feel like I look kind of like a homeless person with this beard. So maybe in a couple weeks you're not going to see this beard anymore. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on, talk a little bit more about this class. As you can see, we've actually changed up the topic here. We were doing environmental justice before, and actually the coronavirus is going to be another environmental justice issue, but we're just going to kind of hit the pause button on environmental justice. Specifically, we're going to pause on talking about weather and climate, and we're going to dive right into the coronavirus. So now I want to just talk to you briefly about the structure of this class, especially in regards to distance learning. So this class is going to be very similar to your other classes with me. You're going to have a PowerPoint. I'm going to be here explaining it to you. I'll be here in this box in the corner. I'll explain to you what's going on. I'll probably upload to Schoology. If some of you are having trouble accessing the PowerPoint on Schoology, I can upload to YouTube as well. It's just going to take a little more time. Anyways, while you watch the lecture, I just want you to take notes as you would during class. And if I ask you to do a task like an entrance task, or I might ask you to answer a question, or I might have like a problem for you to solve, if I ask you to do that, just go ahead and hit pause on the video and take however long that I recommend, like 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, to finish the task. And then when you're ready to start again, just hit play and keep going. One thing that's going to be different for our distance learning classes is I'm going to try and streamline the class. In other words, I'm going to try and make it shorter. I don't think that you should really sit in front of a computer all day. So hopefully our lectures will be down to about 15-20 minutes tops, and hopefully there'll be less notes to take in class. I know that especially lately, especially with environmental justice, there are lots of notes to take, so I apologize. Hopefully through distance learning we'll be able to streamline and reduce the amount of time you're writing in your notebooks. At the same time, Sejong Academy, they really want you to be part of the class, and the only way that we can check if you're part of the class daily is if you're doing your homework. So we're going to have daily assignments. Now, before you lose your mind about these assignments, don't worry too much. It's just going to be things like I'll have you take a picture of your entrance task and either send it to me through Schoology or send it to me by email. There will be some study island assignments as well. It's not going to be anything too challenging. In addition to our daily schedule, I'll be keeping office hours from 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So if you have any questions, there's going to be a link posted on Schoology to the Google Meet link where you can connect with both me and Mr. O during office hours. You can ask us any questions, we'll answer them for you. And our grades are going to be due on April 3rd, so I want you to go back through Schoology, take a look at all the assignments that we did in this past quarter and make sure that you've turned them in. And I really want to emphasize to double check the assignments that you have not turned in. There were two big interruptions this quarter, one being, of course, the coronavirus, but the other one being the WIDA test. WIDA test took me out of class for 2 weeks, and so you have fewer grades. Because you have fewer grades, it's that much more important that you have all of your assignments in. Okay, so next, our entrance task. Our entrance task is real simple. I want you to do a one-pager, take a minute to write or draw everything that you know about the coronavirus. So just do it on one piece of paper. You can make it as pretty or as complex as you like. You don't necessarily have to add colors. If you do, that's great. But just basically tell me everything that you know about the coronavirus. take about 5 minutes to get started on that now, and after 5 minutes, go ahead and continue with the video. Let's talk about objectives. Our content objective for today is to understand what a virus is. Our language objective is to be able to explain how viruses infect living things. Now, keywords. For our keywords, it might feel a little bit silly to repeat words or talk to a computer, but I do want you to practice, especially with a lot of these words, which are going to be a lot more complicated. So virus, simple word. Most of us know what a virus is. It's a type of germ that makes us sick. Invade. Invade means to move into someone else's space, but usually invade has kind of this connotation, this meaning that it's like threatening, like a threatening movement into something else's space. And that's very closely related to this idea of infect. It's kind of a combination. It's a combination of this idea of invading and causing sickness or disease. A host. A host is a living thing which, I guess, helps provide life or supports another living thing. But usually when we talk about a host, we're talking about a parasitic relationship. So we have something like a mosquito, and then like the victim would be the host. When we talk about like ticks or maybe some kind of worms that you get in your body, then you would be the host, and that animal that is kind of living inside of your body would be the parasite. Genetic material. Genetic material is basically the information about who we are, from our hair color to our skin color, shape of our eyes, height, whether we're skinny or muscular. All of that is involved with genetics. And genetics comes in two forms. When we're talking about our genetic material, we're talking either about DNA, and we learned about that in 7th grade. And then it also comes in the form of RNA, which instead of being a double helix, it's just one, I guess, piece, one slice of that double helix. It's one side of the genetic information that goes into DNA. It's a more simple form of DNA. And finally, we have the word exponential. Exponential is related to this idea of exponent, which you've learned in math. So if we take the number 2 and we raise it to the power of 2, 2 to the second power, or 2 squared, is 4. 4 squared is, well, actually 4 squared would be 16, and then 16 squared, you get numbers that progressively get larger and larger and larger. And when that happens, we are talking about something that's growing exponentially or expanding exponentially. So when we think about explosive growth, we're thinking about exponential growth. So what is a virus? You know, viruses are very interesting things. When I was in school, they told us that viruses were living things, very simple forms of life, actually the simplest forms of life. And the dominant theory at the time was that the first forms of life on Earth were viruses. A virus is pretty much nothing more than a strand of genetic information, either DNA or even more simple RNA, that's surrounded by a protein shell. These days, however, lots of scientists think that viruses are not living things. Actually, the dominant thinking on what a virus is has shifted since I was your age. When I was your age, they thought viruses were living things, but viruses, they can't do a lot of the things that living things can do. They can't make their own energy. What else can't they do? They reproduce, but they can't reproduce on their own. They have to have a host to reproduce. They also cannot maintain homeostasis, or sort of this balance, this internal balance of their body in relation to the outside world. They don't grow, they only reproduce. Yeah, and so viruses these days are not considered living things. So what viruses do is they invade other living things and they take over cells. And here are some pictures of different viruses. We've got hepatitis C, the bird flu, smallpox. Smallpox is the virus that Native Americans succumbed to in massive numbers when Europeans came. The flu, another dangerous virus which kills lots of people every year. And we'll talk more about the flu in relation to the coronavirus, which is, let me pull up the cursor. Hopefully you can all see this, the coronavirus right here, which is the reason why we are not in school. And our last virus, of course, is the herpes virus, which is a sexually transmitted disease. Also, lots of people get it in non-sexual ways. Some people are born with it. People, even like common cold sore, that's herpes. Anyways, let's keep going. Viruses are transmitted in lots of different ways. You don't have to write down all of the different ways that viruses are transmitted, especially like these first 4 ways that viruses are transmitted: touch, saliva, mucus, and droplets. Those are all pretty much the same thing. So you could probably combine those all into 2 categories: coughing and sneezing. So either you get caught with droplets of this stuff in the air after someone coughs or sneezes close by, or the droplets fall on something like a table or a desk. You touch that desk and then you're infected. Okay, viruses can also be transmitted through mosquitoes, or other insects like ticks. Actually, ticks are more like spiders. They're not technically insects. They got 8 legs, but you get the idea. They can be transmitted via insects or other living things. Viruses can also be transmitted through sex. And finally, contaminated food or water can transmit a virus. So I was mentioning to you that for the first 4 items on our list here, viruses are transmitted through coughing or sneezing. And one thing that people don't realize is just how much mucus and saliva goes into the air when you cough or sneeze. So here we have a video of someone that's backlit to show exactly how much mucus and saliva go into the air when we sneeze. Let's take a look. Okay, in this video we'll cue up again, and boom. It's just a tremendous amount of stuff going out of your nose and mouth when you sneeze. So please, 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 please cover that cough, cover that sneeze, not with your hand, but with your elbow or with your shoulder. Okay, and especially during this era of the coronavirus, we got to be careful. We got to practice good hygiene. It's just good hygiene to not spit all over the people that are nearby you. So once this very simple form of life gets into a cell, then it's taken over. And the way it does this is it inserts its DNA or its RNA into the nucleus of the host, and then the host does nothing but make endless copies of that virus. So here we have a picture of, let me see if I can get my pen up. Yeah, you can see my cursor here. So this round thing is a virus. Now these little pokey points on the end, usually those are like chemical receptors. And let me explain this a little bit. Cells, they communicate through chemical receptors. And so the virus has these chemical receptors on the outside, which basically kind of tricks the host, the cell, into thinking that this virus is actually a messenger. And so the cell welcomes the virus inside because it thinks it has important information for it, but in fact, the virus is going to insert its DNA right here into the nucleus and take it over. And here we have pictures of viruses. So now the virus has taken over the cell. The cell is making endless copies of this virus. And eventually that cell produces so many copies of this virus that the viruses tear through the cell wall and destroy the cell. And when that happens, you have between hundreds to thousands of viruses spreading throughout the body and infecting other cells. So at first you started with 1 infected cell, and now you're going to get hundreds of infected cells. And those hundreds of infected cells are going to create thousands to tens of thousands of infected cells. Here we have this is actually an image of a bacteria, and this bacteria is being attacked by a specific type of virus called a bacteriophage. And so you can see these bacteriophages on the outside. They're kind of like these little, let me get my pen up. They're these little sort of dark things on the outside here. Those are bacteriophages. And so they've gotten inside of this bacteria, they've taken it over, and they told this bacterial cell to just make endless copies. So each one of these little dots is another bacteriophage. And so I can't count how many dots are here, but I mean, I'm just going to assume that there are hundreds of bacteriophages inside this cell. And eventually they're going to tear out of this bacteria and they're going to spread. And so that's what happens when viruses get into your body. They reproduce tremendously fast, and that's known as exponential reproduction. And Mr. O is going to step in to explain a little bit more about exponential reproduction.
I will explain the additional explanation for this graph. As Mr. Kwok mentioned before, this graph means exponential reproduction graph. So on the y-axis, you can see the population size. It means the viruses. So population size of viruses. And on the x-axis, you can see the time. So let's start with the beginning of this graph. I will mark it as A. So on area A, at the beginning of this graph, the slope is not that great, right? So the meaning of this slope is the population size of viruses per time. In other words, it means the growth rate of population size. As you see, if you're focusing on A, the slope is not that great, right? You can see. And now I will mark out the B section, and I also indicate the slope. So my question is, when we compare the A and B, which slope is greater? Yeah, the answer is B is far much greater than A, I mean slope. When we're comparing the slope, B is far much greater than A. In other words, it means that the growth rate of population size of viruses is greater on B. So in summarize, or in conclusion, as time flows, the growth rate of virus population size will be increased. As time flows, there will be more viruses than at the beginning. So with the more number of viruses, it is easy to destroy the other cells or infect other cells. At the beginning of this graph, we can see the gradual increase in their population size, but as time flows, their growth rate, their growth in population size is going to be dramatic, greater than the beginning of this graph.
All right, ninth graders. Hopefully this first lesson wasn't too painful for you. Your homework is going to be to complete your one-pager. So just take about, I don't know, another 10 to 15 minutes to finish your one-pager. If you can, use some crayons, make it look nice, and then take a photo of it and send it to me either at my email address, sjkwok@Sejong Academy, or upload it to Schoology. Okay, it's great to be with you again. I will see you tomorrow. Check the distance learning folder for Coronavirus 2.